On Wasatch County Planning Commission.
We're ready now.
Somebody like to make that motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept the manager's recommendation for the three names presented for the Wasatch County Planning Commission, and that Gerald Heyward be put on as full, Bob Gappmeier, Giles, and that Eckersley be put on as an associate to replace Gerald Heyward.
Brad.
You already said Jay. So
Oh, sorry, Jay Eckersley is the full, and Brad Lyle is the associate. That's right. Sorry.
Jay's associate too, but he's
Jay's an associate.
Sorry.
Brad will be up for reappointment in.
So Gerald, Bob,
Clarify,
Lou.
yeah.
Okay, so Gerald, Bob, and Lou fill the
Full-time.
full-time, and that Mr. Eckersley and Mr. Lyle fill the associate positions.
Which not Brad Lyle specifically on Heyward, which would limit his to 1 year term, right?
He just fills the rest of his term.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
I'm seconding it.
Okay, Mr. Farrell seconds. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, our next item is the Mountain Accord. Participation in Mountain Accord. We've got Mr.
Is he on yet?
Capson.
You called him, Mike?
Mr. Capson, who has served as our representative on that committee, and who now took his place.
I did. Let me just kind of give some background. As of January, we changed, Steve was no longer there, because they were getting to a,
extension is not valid.
potential vote on which course to take of the 7 or 8 options. I invited Mr. Capson to stay on and represent us, and I'd go to the meetings with him and tell, because it was hard for me to catch up that much. We had a meeting last week, which I couldn't attend, and he went for that. That was an executive session. Realizing that this was coming up, this is a big amount of money. I think we're getting a little more clear now on what effect we will have on Wasatch County. So we're going to have that discussion. Mike, add to it if you will.
Okay.
And see what you think. Can you hear us, Steve?
I can.
Okay.
Okay. As you recall, a little over a year ago, we were asked to participate in the process of the Mountain Accord and essentially buy a seat in the inner circle of the premium
Executive Committee.
Executive Committee. There are other committees which anybody which had positions in them. Doug Smith attends. I don't remember the different levels of committees. There are essentially 3 levels that we could participate in. And I know Doug, along with other planners, participate on the 2nd level. There's also another level where a lot of public participate in special interest groups and so forth. In purchasing ours, it was $25,000 2 times. $50,000. It was in 2 installments. They got to a certain point of basically the presentation that was given by the people that visited. But that kind of took us to that point. And now they're looking to say, okay, we want to proceed to the next point. And what they're asking for is $150,000 in 3 installments, $50,000 each installment. So the question we need to ask,
For how long? 3 years.
well, until they get through the next
And
process.
maybe Steve could answer that. Steve, I told them already that you attended the meeting the other day because I couldn't, and they've just now explained what our request is. So
Yeah.
bring us up
The
to
next
speed.
contribution is for the next phase, for phase 2.
That'll
It's
take how
not
long?
for a year, it's for the next phase.
How long will that take?
It's anticipated to be a year to 18 months.
What is phase 2?
Phase 2 is where they now begin to go into the NEPA process and begin. So let me back up. Phase 1 was they were supposed to get, at the end of phase 1, they were supposed to get to what was referred to as the preferred alternative, or the preferred route or alternative for the transportation corridor transportation solution in order to go into NEPA. However, what they learned was that they don't have to have a preferred alternative to start the NEPA process. And because of unreconciled differences between some of the parties that are part of Mountain Accord, they decided to hold off on even trying to get to a preferred solution until closer to the end of the NEPA process. By the end of the NEPA process, they do absolutely have to have a preferred solution. The problem that's come up is the Cottonwood Canyons. They can't agree on some land deals that quite frankly are holding up coming or arriving at a preferred alternative. But phase 2 would then begin, where we begin is when they get through the public comment period and they begin the NEPA process. That's phase 2.
How, maybe I should ask, how important is it for Wasatch County to be involved in the NEPA process? That's pretty well done by a private consulting.
Well, because the preferred alternative hasn't been arrived at, the members who would benefit from Mountain Accord should be still involved heavily. However, a week ago, if I was asked whether or not Wasatch County should continue to participate, I'd probably recommend no, simply because at the beginning of this, we had two major concerns at the beginning, and why I think Wasatch County decided to participate in phase 1. One was water concerns. As it turns out, everybody had the same concerns for water, and everybody's, that was probably the first thing to get off the table was everybody was concerned about water, and so therefore we're not going to do anything to screw anybody's water up. That's kind of been, everybody's kind of gotten past the water issue. The thing that, the other issue for Wasatch County was what effect would this have on future transportation as it relates to potentially the Jordan area and all the future growth that could come from there. However, what's also happened in the whole process is, although it has a 20-year look, the Mountain Accord does, the reality is they're more concerned about what the transportation needs are right now, which means that, Wasatch County did not rise to the top in those needs lists. Instead, the areas where they currently have major congestion, Little Cottonwood Canyon, Big Cottonwood Canyon, Park City, really is what the current transportation solution is focused on. Although down the road it could focus on some future expansions, but it doesn't really, I would say, benefit Wasatch County, the transportation. Indirectly, yes, because as congestion lessens in Park City, it could have an effect on us as well indirectly, but directly the transportation solution is not something that's affecting us. So a week ago, I would have probably said no. I probably doesn't. We're not a major benefactor, and we can always attend the meetings even though we're not on the board and observe what's going on. However, yesterday in the meeting, it was announced that American Fork Canyon, Utah County, is beginning has already begun the exact same process of a Mountain Accord type of planning process, and that they're accelerating to try and catch up to Mountain Accord. And the reason that has become so important is because one of the land deals that's holding the Mountain Accord up from being able to arrive at, there's two principal land deals that are holding up Mountain Accord being able to arrive at a preferred solution. Number one is Grizzly Gulch, which is up by Alta. The environmentalists in the group would like the private parties that own Grizzly Gulch to trade that for property more close down to around their base ski resort areas. The ski resort is saying, well, they'll do that if there's actually a transportation solution that's arrived at. If you're not going to ever get to a transportation solution, then they're never going to give up their Grizzly Gulch, because Grizzly Gulch is the key to the Ski Utah plan, or the Ski Utah plan, that connects the ski resorts all together via chairlift. So it's a skier alternative to connecting it versus a rail system that would connect skiers and workers and everybody. I think we won Wasatch. I think the representative from Ski Utah came and presented it to us as the One Wasatch plan. But in order for One Wasatch to happen, it has to have Grizzly Gulch. So they're not about to give up their ownership of Grizzly Gulch until they actually can see a real solution. So they're caught in a catch-22. and the ski resort's not going to give on that. So that's why the whole Grizzly Gulch solution is not going to happen until the very end of the NEPA process. And they can see if there's actually a transportation solution or not. The other one, and this is where we come into play, is Snowbird. Snowbird wants to trade some lands that they have for current base facility land, current land that their hotels are actually sitting on that's under lease, but they want to trade it for ownership. And also land that, although they won't say this directly, land that could be used for base facility in American Fork Canyon that they could use as for hotels or whatever someday. That is where the Utah County is coming in, and they're wanting to do the same planning process, but Snowbird is also not willing to do the land trades that are necessary if there's not a transportation solution, and they don't get the trade for the land over in Mineral Basin. And so without those land trades, all that has to be put to the end. Once those resorts can see that there's an actual transportation solution that's actually going to go forward, then they'll agree to the land trades. But in the meantime, that becomes important to American Fork Canyon and therefore Utah County, because I'm sure they'd like to plan out what kind of construction or what kind of infrastructure development would happen in American Fork Canyon. When that came up, part of this whole process is, in that land swap deal, is a federal lands designation task force is looking at designating land that's within the project area and finding some designation. Now, the environmentalists have already come out, the Save Our Canyons, they jumped the gun here a week and a half ago, and they came out with what they prefer the solution to be, which is a presidentially designated national monument. Well, that's going to go over real well in Utah after the last national monument debacle with Clinton. So that's not going to happen. But the other alternatives are probably more palatable to Utahns, which would probably be a national recreation area, somewhat like Lake Powell, where they're not as restrictive and they don't have such a bad taste in their mouth as far as the way they were created. That would not put the same restrictions. However, if they do let's say it's a national recreation area. Well, if Utah County doesn't come up to speed and Mountain Court just does their own, then that recreation area wouldn't even encompass any lands in Wasatch County. However, once they bring in American Fork Canyon into the picture and kind of do a master national recreation area, all of a sudden a whole bunch of that land up behind Wasatch Mountain State Park all of a sudden got included in this federal land designation task force as to be included in that designation. And so that would be the only reason we would, in my opinion, we'd want to be able to watch this closely, is that if they do, what would be the impact on those lands between Wasatch Mountain State Park, which is actually currently in the National Forest Service. What would be the impact of that on uses for Wasatch County residents and visitors and tourists and whatnot? So that's the only reason, but again, I think that could be monitored without actually having to sit on the board, quite frankly.
Well, I've attended them Utah County meetings, and we've had Solitude, the ski resort down there, sitting in on the meetings, and they're more concerned about congestion in American Fork Canyon and how they're going to do that. I've never heard once of this tying into the Mountain Court.
Yeah, it's moving quickly, but that's just something that they came up with, that they would like to speed their process up so that they can bring it up to speed with Mountain Court, simply for the reason that there's this federal land designation task force out there that is actually working with Chaffetz's office and Lee's office and a whole bunch of others. So this task force is not just the Mountain Court local group, it encompasses a whole bunch of people who are studying how to designate this land. And so that in the conversation, and again, it's all very fluid, but they do want to bring themselves up to speed as fast as possible, so that if there's one bill before Congress to do a lands designation, then they'd like to do it all at once and not in two separate bills. That's why they'd like to come up to speed as fast as they can And that, when they did that, when they brought in American Fork Canyon, Utah County side, that's when all of a sudden the bubble that they had painted over for this national recreation area or national whatever conservation area or whatever it is, national monument or whatever the designation they choose, that they'd like to bring their side into it as well in the same congressional bill. That's why they're now all of a sudden wanting to go fast. That's the only, and again, when that happened, all of a sudden that bubble they painted over, before when it was just Mountain Accord, it didn't have any of Wasatch County painted in the bubble. But all of a sudden they're now talking about this increased bubble to include Utah County. And when that happened, all of a sudden it included lands that were not just in Utah County, but Wasatch County. So, but that could be monitored and watched, and we could give our opinion on it, I would think easily enough. But the big benefit to this whole transportation solution is really the Wasatch Front. I'm not even sure Park City thinks it's a great big benefit. They're probably more there for protectionism than to see see this thing happen. But I mean, the people on the front are probably trying to convince them that there's a big benefit to them, and maybe there really is, but we don't see that big benefit because the transportation solution simply isn't a direct benefit to us. There might be an indirect benefit for us if there's some sort of transportation solution that comes up parties like rail. I'm sure there'd be some sort of a rail head where people who live in Wasatch County could park and ride. So there is an indirect benefit to Wasatch County that way, I guess, but I'm not sure it's worth $150,000 for that indirect benefit.
Maybe we're best off being involved with the Utah County group. They've asked us to sit on that committee at no charge. And their first meeting, their big first concern was get this on the radar so that if the legislature starts passing out funds to study the transportation in the canyon, they'd be eligible funds as well.
Yes, and they did. The legislature did fund Mountain Accord again this year. Only they did it instead of a direct amount from the legislature. It's indirectly being done through GoId, and I think it's like $3 million.
Steve, Mike here. You've been sitting there for a while, and I know we've been a participant. If we pull out, realizing we can go monitor, what's the politics of that? Is there a reaction that we would possibly lose ground even just monitoring, or is there any fear of that?
Oh, no, I don't. I mean, they're going to be disappointed if they lose some, but we're such a small player. And quite frankly, again, the whole plan, the solutions they've come up with, the alternatives, none of them are in Wasatch County. I mean, what has highlighted from this whole process is, the interesting part is, we were really critical there for a while because Park City, how do I back up? Well, I'm just going to say it. What it has demonstrated is some of the differences and some of our issues that we have more with Park City, and not so much part of the transportation solution, but some of our issues that we have to iron out with Park City and Summit County, mostly Park City, like Bonanza Flats. They've done everything along the way, Park City has, quite frankly, and again, I'm just being honest here. Park City has done everything they could along the way to do anything they could to try and undermine, let's put it that way, undermine any future development or anything going on in Bonanza Flats. They just hate Bonanza Flats. They know that the way that the corridor to get into Bonanza Flats is not going to come up Pine Canyon. They know that the historical access is always coming up over Empire Pass. They hate that. They tried everything they could to put, land preservation bubbles on it, and I got them removed. They tried their best to get a permanent closure of 248 or 243. What is that?
224.
224.
What's that?
224.
244.